digitaljamsessions.com.
Hello and welcome to this Digital Jam session. Today we're coming at you live from level 39 here in Canary Wharf, London. And we're joined by the lovely Bercy from Virtual Umbrella. We have Jeremy from PwC back with us again. And we have Q from level 39. Welcome, gentlemen.
Hello.
Why don't you explain, for the benefit of our lovely listeners, exactly who you are and what you do? I'm going to start with you, Q, because you are the noob in this group.
Hey, so my name is Conan McGee. I head up the technology at Level 39, which is one of Europe's largest fintech technology spaces and incubators.
Wonderful, thank you. Bertie, why don't you tell us all of the wonderful things that you're doing with Virtual Umbrella?
So I'm Bercy. I'm the managing director of Virtual Umbrella. We're a marketing agency / consultancy / industry body that operates in the VR and AR space worldwide.
Wonderful, thank you. Jeremy, why don't you remind our lovely listeners all about what you're doing with PwC?
Hey guys, I'm Jeremy and I lead PwC's VR AR activities, helping clients in all industries understand virtual reality and augmented reality, how they can use it in their business, and also managing the software development and deployment of these solutions.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much for joining me, gentlemen. And what I want to talk about today is something that I find quite interesting because we are in level 39 and we've just come from a lovely event with the good folk at Amazon. But I want to talk more about the community that exists, both around the technology community, but also around the VR and AR communities. Because I think that there are a lot of people who may be just outside of our core industry, who look in, are on the outside looking in, wondering exactly how they get into these communities or where these communities exist. And whilst it's fine for people like Bertie, who's very active, for example, on Facebook, and you're very much part of these communities on Facebook, I think there's a lot of people who come into these industries and, they kind of wonder where everybody's at, And I wonder from your perspective, Bertie, in terms of you guys, you and Sammy at Virtual Umbrella, you originally created the VR in a bar, and that kind of original community of people kind of getting together in a bar, having a chat about VR and the cool tech and cool applications and just getting the tech on people's faces in the first place. But that was something that it took a while for people to really kind of begin to gather around that. So from your perspective, what do you think are the key challenges for those people who are coming in who don't really understand what the landscape is and don't understand why those communities exist right now?
So as a preface, VR in a bar came from the folks at the loading bar who they just had this idea, wouldn't it be cool if we put VR in a bar because it rhymes? And then after running one event, they realized they run a bar and they've got to run the bar and they need help. They need other people to come in and help them with it. So that's where we came in and we partnered with them to try and push this further. From the community aspect, I think it's very much a case of when people are new and they're coming to this community, it can seem quite like foreboding or intimidating from the outside. Like, I think a lot of us in the industry forget that the industry is now probably 3 to 4 years old, like this new wave of VR and the way it's maturing. And people who are coming in now, they don't have that level playing field that we all had to begin with. And because it's still in this strange stage where it's not new, but it's not established yet, there's not like a guide or there's not like a space that people can go to get involved. Like the same way that if you're involved with certain other industries, like it's very clear, like there's a something for beginners meetup. We don't really have that with Immersive Technologies yet.
And I'd say the reason why initiatives like VR in a bar are so important is that virtual reality and augmented reality, in particular virtual reality, are not like other emerging technologies in the sense that it's very difficult to do them justice by simply explaining them and talking to them and presenting about them. You really have to experience it firsthand. And VR in a bar is a great example of how you can do that, as well as the multiple community events that get run in London where people run their enterprise demos, their consumer applications, and ultimately get people in headsets to experience virtual reality firsthand.
I find this interesting though, because what we're talking about with VR in a bar, as somebody who's been along to VR in a bar, the community there was, let's be honest, very games industry focused. It felt a lot like, a lot of game devs kind of coming together, having a drink and, checking out each other's stuff. And that's great if you're within the games industry or you have that kind of knowledge of people within the games industry. But if you're somebody, say, for example, from the automotive industry or the fintech industries, and you're walking into that kind of environment, it's very difficult to get past that kind of bubble, if you like, of this is, a group of gamers essentially hanging out and admiring each other's work. And I'm sure, Jeremy, from your perspective, having done a lot of PwC events, that you see a lot of that kind of silo barrier thing happening as well, where people are coming from these different industries where they're just kind of like a bit, I don't really get you. I don't really understand, what you do or why that's cool to you or how you interact with each other, because you're talking in a different lingo here. You've got a different jargon and I don't get you. Do you see a lot of that happening?
Yeah, I do, unfortunately. The video gaming industry in relation to virtual reality is a double-edged sword. It's very strong, which is wonderful for pushing VR out there and getting people to try it out. But the other edge of the sword is that it's disadvantageous to the industry as a whole, in that it builds perceptions in people's minds that this technology only amounts to a plaything, effectively, an entertainment device, a video gaming platform, and nothing more. And that's a perception that I'm repeatedly trying to break with all clients that come to us. Fortunately, once they understand the enterprise applications, I can do that successfully. But before that, that is the perception they have in their mind. So sometimes I would imagine they don't even get to us because they have that perception in their mind and they don't understand that virtual reality and augmented reality are business tools. Absolutely.
So, Q, from your perspective and what you do with Level 39, I mean, obviously you're talking about, again, an industry where primarily you're talking about a lot of fintech community types who are kind of gathering and amalgamating around Level 39. But when you are trying to kind of bring together the community around immersive technologies, you've had a few different events here now, around immersive technologies. How are you breaking down those barriers between those people who are non-entertainment and those people who are much more corporate focused?
Well, there's two parts of this puzzle. One is that Level 39 has about 210 companies, actually a bit more than that. 50% are fintech, 12.5% are cybersecurity, and the remainder is everything else in between, from health tech, even to VR, to drone tech, and everything in between. But one strategy that we found more that naturally took place and part planned and it part happened is when you get loads of the same types of people but from different companies in the same place, you have that cluster effect. And that seems to work really well. It helps them all grow together. But then luckily what we've got here is we've got these 210 companies. If you look at it, 50% fintech, but then the other 50% is from all different types of verticals, you get loads of clusters taking place. So even when we do our VR and AR event, and we've got another one coming up in a few months, a repeat of the exhibitor demo day we did in October, we're going to get not just gamers, don't get me wrong. I think without the gaming industry, VR wouldn't even be where it is. But as Jeremy said, there's so many more applications for VR, AR, immersive, and all types of technology. You can never limit it down to one. But we're going to make sure that it's got a bit of every type of industry that is available that we can get representative, from automotive to health. I can't release too much information yet about who's coming down. Entertainment is coming down as well to that event. So it's going to be a bit of everyone there. And then that way, most people who attend and who follow up later on the social media, they will see something that will spark something in their mind saying, oh yeah, we could do that, or this is an idea that we should get into. At the same time, like we had Amazon Sumerian here today, the industry is getting a bit more easier to get into, less barriers to entry. So in my spare time example, I would use a bit of Unity, even though that's one of the most cross-platform, quote marks, easiest tools to use. You still need to know physics.
Yes.
And I didn't do physics, so I'm reading that in my spare time. I don't know why, but that's how it is. So, the barrier to entry is going, but we find that clustering strategy, get loads of the same types of people and then vary that and multiply it. Okay. And that seems to work, and it just grows, and everybody seems to benefit from it.
Okay. So I'm going to go back to something that you, Bertie and Jeremy kind of alluded to, which was this idea of, in order to have I'm saying good in inverted commas, immersive, community event, that there is this kind of perception that you do need to just get a headset on people's head. You know what I mean? You need to put them in VR. And the risk and the danger with that is that what you end up with is basically an expo. And it becomes a case of the same people sharing the same content, and it becomes more of an agency thing than it is a community thing. And I'm curious what your kind of insights are in terms of how you get away from that perception of this is just another bunch of people showing me the same stuff, the same things, and I have to put a headset on in order to even participate, versus something where there is genuine value and genuine relationships that are being cultivated within that event and environment without it being rows and rows of people all sitting and watching somebody on a stage. And Bertie, you shook your head really vehemently when I said about headsets. So tell me what your thoughts are on this.
I shook my head aggressively towards your comment about putting headsets on people's heads.
Yes.
Because that is not the way to do this at all. Like we've come up with this. This has come up because other people have said it, and then it gets thought about more, and it gets put together, and it gets generated over time. But like the rules to showing VR, like you have to give people context beforehand. You have to make them understand what they're going to see before they put the headset on. You can't just put a headset on someone and be like, you're going to love this. Like, we've seen it in the past where someone's had a crippling fear of water, and we put them in an underwater experience, and they start screaming and they throw it on the floor.
Yes.
And it's like, oh, that's a £500 headset that's just been very aggressively thrown into the floor. And it's like, it's not their fault. It's a natural reaction because they weren't given the context beforehand. And like the three rules that we feel that people need to abide by is that you need to give context beforehand. You need to ensure they have no distractions. They're given the best experience possible while they're in there. None of the whole, oh, it's funny when my friends push me, which you see a lot of.
Yeah.
And then finally, it's allowing them time to decompress if they need it afterwards. Like certain VR experiences might elicit a reaction. So, for example, some of the more documentary-based pieces are designed to make you feel something.
Or the Control piece that was done about domestic violence, for example.
Yeah, exactly. So Control about domestic violence. Like the idea isn't you just take it off and go, great, next person, in you go. It's how do you feel after that? What are your thoughts on this?
I'm here if you want. That?
Yeah, I'm here if you want to talk. We've got support materials is available. It's about making sure they process it. And then when we work with companies that are doing like installations, we go even further. We say to them the experience starts as soon as you walk into the room, not when you put the headset on. Some people who do this really well are Sheffield International Documentary Festival.
Yep.
So where they run their alternate reality showcase each year, it's all curated by a curator and a producer who's an artist at the same time. And it means that when you go in there, there's a flow to the room. The whole room gives you a certain vibe. And as soon as you step in, you're prepped to go through a series of experiences, as opposed to the more trade show feeling of I'm walking down a corridor, there's people trying to sell me things on either side.
You know what? I want to drill down into this because it is one of my personal bugbears, how you go to a lot of events or conferences or meetups and people just want to shove a headset on your head with no context, and there's no decompression afterwards, and you're in this really bustling environment where there's going to be the odd person that wants to poke somebody or pinch somebody or whatever the stupid thing is they want to do, but in general there isn't a huge amount of thought that's being given to the experience. And what I'm interested in and what I'm seeing more of emerge right now is the focus around LBE or location-based entertainment experiences and installations, but also this new thing that I don't know if you've heard this one as well or not, but people have started saying that they're doing LARPing for immersive experiences, and all they really mean by that is that they are making it more immersive from the moment that you step into the environment where the technology is going to be demonstrated. So from that very first moment, you are in an immersive environment that is fully encompassed. So everything from the lighting and the people that you see to the smells that you're smelling, everything about that environment is already pre-planned so that it's giving you that gradual introduction into whatever it is you're going to experience when you put the headset itself on. And then when you take that headset off, you're still having an interaction with players or actors who are going to follow up on the experience that you had, and that's what they mean by LARPing. So in some cases you might call that more immersive theatre or kind of more artistic than necessarily LARPing, but that's the phraseology that people are currently using. I
think it's the way that I've seen it, it's more like the theme park effect.
Exactly.
In terms of, Disney have got it down in that when you go to one of their parks, the actors remain in character when you go onto certain rides.
Yeah.
And you've seen it in The Void, which is obviously a Star Wars IP, and The Void is partially owned by Disney. But the way that all their staff on site are wearing the Empire uniform, they're not necessarily in character. They probably don't get paid enough for that. But like, you step onto the site and then you don't just get you're going to put a headset on and shoot some things that aren't really there. It's you get put in a room.
And they give you your mission briefing.
Yeah, you have a mission briefing, which comes from a character who was from Star Wars. And then you go in and then you put on your headsets and you put on your backpacks and things like this. And it's like, it's a lot more tailored than just stick it on, off you go, do a thing.
I wonder though whether or not enough people are going to think about putting in the context to necessarily, because that's a lot of hard work really when you think about it, to put enough effort into providing that context before you go into a headset experience. How many people, especially corporations or big companies, whether that's fashion and retail, whether that's, fintech or medical or whoever, who aren't necessarily thinking in those terms, because it is a very entertainment-y kind of focus to give that experience from the moment that you start queuing, so to speak, to make the experience begin from that point.
From an enterprise perspective, a lot of the rules we've been talking about apply in exactly the same way. In fact, it's oftentimes more important to make sure that there's context behind what you're showing to a business client. If we entertain someone from the automotive industry, I will do my best to ensure that they have an automotive-related application that they can see in virtual reality and/or augmented reality. If I can't do that, I will try to drop down to the next level of giving them a solution that's not necessarily automotive-related, but at least I can, through my own commentary, draw the relation between that experience and the automotive industry. Because at the moment it's very challenging. I can't necessarily show clients a fantastic world-class example of VR and AR in every single industry. But what I can do is try and give them world-class VR AR and provide the context of how it might apply to their industry. And I think even if you go down to that plan B, ultimately you're trying to fulfill the same aim, which is bringing context to that example and why you're showing them what you're showing.
Okay. So, Q, from your perspective, though, when we talk about some of the events that you're hosting, obviously they tend to be less exhibitor focused in terms of you don't have a lot of people necessarily demonstrating their stuff. How do you bring that kind of experience side of things into your type of events?
Well, in October, we did a VR AR exhibitor demo day. And it had, a lot of people showing up. But we also had about 15 plus exhibitors and another 15 or so speakers on the day, all showing things on the screen. So, and Jeremy and PwC were also involved in that event. So one bug we found when we go to all these trade shows and events and exhibitions is it's all about the person who's putting on the headset. They get to see the experience. No one else actually knows what the hell's going on.
Exactly.
And, there could be 20 stands, but only 20 people get to see what's going on. So one criteria that we set, and we don't like making rules, especially in tech, it's better to be a bit more free-flowing. But we had to make one rule was that you have to have something visual that the passers-by can see.
Yes.
Not just the person wearing the headset. And we even said behind the scenes, if for whatever reason your application isn't running to scratch or your laptop's doing some reboot, have a video on loop that's just on the screens.
Yeah.
Because what my main aim is to make sure that everybody walking past can actually see and benefit from what's going on. And then from the level 39 perspective, the reason I had this mindset is we just want to basically build communities, build ecosystems, and bring these clusters together. So I think the best way we found is all these different types of people we invited to these VR exhibitor days and to other events. We try to do it in such a way where sometimes half are from that industry of what the event's about. So half would have been from VR AR industry and communities, but the other half are from complete different industries and communities, partly because we have such a variety of tech verticals here. But this way, everybody who was walking past could see, and it created so much more interaction, so much more deals, and just so much more benefit for everybody involved.
Do you know, it's an interesting point, and it's one that again, we've spoken about this quite a few times now, is this idea that for some reason there is this real focus about the person in the headset. And this is the same for like VR arcading or, any of this other stuff where people just want to, if you go to whether it's Tribeca or, whichever film festival where they're doing their 360 film festival, because I refuse to call it VR festival, the focus is very much on whoever is experiencing the content in that moment. And for some reason, people have not yet managed to kind of latch on to the natural behavior that we're seeing, which is when people can see what somebody else is experiencing in VR, they are more engaged with that. Because a lot of people don't necessarily want to put the headset on themselves. They would much rather observe somebody else experiencing the VR than to experience that VR for themselves first time. And there does seem to be a lack of people who want to leverage the audience that isn't actually in the headset. And this is actually where I think the esports industry have a huge amount to offer, because this is the natural behavior of esports, of somebody watching somebody else play a game. It's the same thing. Somebody else watching somebody experience VR. And there's so many learnings that I think the esports industry has to offer to people who are thinking about demonstrating or exhibiting within the VR and AR industries. I just wonder whether or not there is enough people thinking about actually how can we leverage this idea of audiences who want to observe rather than participate, because it's not just about the participant. If you think about how many people can actually afford a headset right now, there's very few people who can necessarily cough up on a whim, maybe $3,000 to get a decent setup. Let's, be honest, if you're talking about decent setup. Whereas there's a whole shit ton of people who can afford a mobile phone to watch somebody else doing something in VR.
I think we need to simplify sometimes things. So maybe one reason is that the exhibitors or the people who maybe run the show, they want the perfect solution for the person who's walking, or the hundreds of people walking past. So what we did, and what we do all the time, is we'll just say, all right, we'll give you a screen, HDMI your laptop into that screen. We know the people walking past can't have that interactive experience unless you set up all these motion sensors, and some people do because they're using a Vive or they're experimenting with other things. But it's just literally, if we just simplify it a bit and say, let it be a video on loop, let it just be just a real-time render of whatever's going on in the headset. And so, a bit of context gets taken out of it, but that's the easiest way. It's literally a screen and a HDMI cable. Instead of going for that perfect solution. Because as soon as you want the perfect solution, you need more headsets, you need more supercomputers, you need more sensors and all of this. And then that's where it could collapse. And I think a lot of time it comes down to that. Okay.
Ready, have anything to add to that?
Yeah, so I saw two really interesting solutions to this. One was what the Philharmonia Orchestra did at South by Southwest, where they worked with Igloo, who do shared VR experiences inside of a big cylinder.
Yeah.
So they have 5 projectors that project a mapped 360 video onto a cylinder. They had 5 people in the center using VR headsets, and then they invited other people in, and they could all stand inside of the cylinder as well and watch the experience being projected onto the dome or onto the cylinder, which meant they didn't have to put a headset on, and the audio was blasted out through a 3D audio array, as it's called, which is essentially a set of speakers all the way around in 360, so that when you look to your left, it sounds like the strings are really playing on your left. When you turn to the right, the percussion is really there. This was playing Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, for context. So that was a really smart way of having people in VR, but also allowing people to see it and understand what the people in the headset are seeing, and also having their own unique experience at the same time. The other solution was being used by Within, and they were using MK2's bespoke VR pods that they've created, which are essentially just a really slick VR demo station. They had 6 of them in a circle, and all 6 people were playing a multiplayer game together. It was a multiplayer storytelling, interactive-based game, and it ends with you having to fight this big monster. And you had these people screaming and laughing and shouting to each other, but they're all exposed on this cylinder, and all of them have massive 32-inch or 40-inch screens built into their station. So you could walk around this and you could see the perspective of all 6 people, and all of them are screaming and laughing and shouting. And it's just a really nice, contained, slick way of showing the experience of 6 different people at the same time, because you're seeing them physically interact. whilst at the same time seeing it on the screen from their perspective. And you're very aware that you're enjoying this vicariously. But because you've got 6 different perspectives, it's almost as if you're seeing the whole thing filled in around you. And when I was there, this experience, this had crowds of like 30, 40 people at a time just watching. So 6 people are on it, and then you've got like almost 8 times that just standing around and laughing at reactions or watching it happen. Like not even the people in the queue.
The irony is that is actually a very esports way of like
Exactly.
demonstrating.
It's the exact like ESL kind of spectator based audience.
Okay.
It's just in.
And because we're not biased, we'll just throw in the name Gfinity as well.
And on an adjacent note, I think the learning from this discussion just now is that virtual reality doesn't have to be consumed via a head-mounted display.
Not at all.
In fact, what Bertie was just talking about there with Igloo's solution, whereby you can have people in effectively a hemispherical dome, and where you are having an environment projected all around them, that is effectively a way of emulating a virtual world, which is ultimately what we're trying to do with virtual headsets.
I mean, the guys at Framestore, Rash, Sadu, and the team at Framestore, they did this with the Bus to Mars, ages ago now. So I think it's proven that you don't have to have a specific, HMD or headset in front of your eyeballs in order to have, whether that's an individual immersive experience or a collective shared immersive experience. I don't think it's a requirement that you necessarily need to have a headset in front of your eyes in order to make that happen. But as always, we like to ask the big questions. So I'd like to ask you, what do you think that needs to change? Be that a cultural or a technological shift that needs to happen in order for communities to be able to gather? What do you think needs to happen? So I'm going to start with you, Jeremy, because you've been on the show the most.
So I think whenever it comes to a battle between technological challenges and cultural challenges, technology is rarely the problem. The real barrier here is cultural, especially with something like VR, where we're trying to convince people to change their digital input and output method from, a keyboard and a mouse on an external screen to maybe voice recognitions, gestures, hand controllers on a screen in front of their face that they can control effectively this perspective of. What I'd like to see, and what we're seeing now, in fact, and I'm putting a lot of stake in, is the advance of standalone headsets.
Oh yeah.
Where effectively the user experience is vastly improved for the user, in the sense that you're no longer dealing with lots of kit where you've got tethers, you've got external accessories and devices that all have to be in sync, you've got extra hardware to purchase. With standalone headsets, you effectively have got everything built into a headset, and all you have to do is put it on. So I'm hopeful for that in terms of driving mainstream adoption.
Okay, I hear you, and I kind of agree to a certain extent, but I will say this. When it comes to the standalone headsets, my bugbear at the moment is still that, I'm not going to name names of particular headsets here, but I will say that the ecosystem for those headsets is still too small. There's just not enough content there to validate having the standalone headset when it's on a separate operating system and it's got a separate ecosystem to obtain that content, and you can't get access to necessarily, the wealth of content that you could if you were on a tethered, system.
Field of dreams, build it and they will come.
I'm just saying there are not yet enough content pieces
I'm seeing
there.
what you're seeing, because I eBayed my Oculus DK2 because I had the Oculus before it was cool.
Yeah.
And now I've got the you can say the main tethered one out there, but the magnet stopped working for some reason. I can't figure out why. And also there is a lot less proper serious apps out there for it, but the ecosystem is still building. It's still new.
Yeah.
And in most areas still new, but also I think one problem is there's no unified control pad. So you go Oculus before you had the Xbox control. Now they've made some amazing controls. You go Vive, you've got some great controls. But I think there just needs to be it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
But if there was a unified control pad or some sort of logic that all control pads could share, so the developers could kind of spread across all of these control pads. And there is some stuff in Unity and Unreal but you still have to do a bit of configuration. that would kind of make it easier for these wireless headsets. These, because the wired ones need to be wired to, quite a beastly computer to work. And then you've also got, where do you get the apps from? So I know one of the two main tethered ones is better to get because you can kind of benefit from both the main app stores.
Yeah.
But you've got technology and you've got consumers, but you've also got industry. Now, Hollywood, they're going to be, I think, one of the main people, along with the games industry. Esports itself has the word E before it, so it's still entertainment already. It's still limited to the digital crowd, though it's going to be bigger than real sports, and maybe it already is. But I think Hollywood will start to do more of experience, and it's not just the movies, it's just TV shows, the Netflix series as well. They let you be part of the series or interact with the series or do some wild things that you can do in real life through a VR headset, probably through even the cardboards as well as the tethered ones. And I think that's going to get more people into it. But when it may change, again, this is just my opinion, is when we can find those mass user needs which currently would be served better using a headset or a semi-transparent HoloLens type headset or a hologram in 10 years' time, when we can find something that works better. For example, visiting a shop for a digital purchase or something that you don't need to pick up there, a perishable good. If that could be served better, and it's a bit of a pain point now, and it could be delivered through another medium, we've got the pain point. Then having that universal solution that just works, not like you have to use this Xbox controller for this device and this Sony controller for that device. That's the other bug, because then it passes that, the generic test. Can any elder in your family just pick it up and can it work? So for it to become mainstream like a laptop, there's still a while to go, but it's still getting there, because we're going to find pain points. We're going to find universal solutions. And
what Q's talking about there relates to your favourite lesson, Tanya, which is just because you can build it
doesn't mean you should. Thank you for allowing me to get that phrase into this session. But I'm going to say two things here. First of all, yes, there are a lot of and we say Hollywood in inverted commas here, kind of companies and organisations who are kind of throwing their hat in the ring and getting involved. NBC Universal just did a deal. Various other people have done deals. I will say that for me, it's still incredibly frustrating because I see a lot of content that just really does not need to be in a headset. I just don't understand the validation and the reasoning for wanting to do a 360, series or content alongside the traditional, TV show that they've got going on, just because it's a fad, it's a thing.
Let's just call 360 panorama.
Because
that's what it is. It's just a panorama.
It's very frustrating to me that they're kind of, just bolting on these things and they don't really understand why they're using the technology. They're just like, oh, it's another cool thing. Let's just do it. So that is one thing. But second of all, I think that what you touched on there, Q, is actually really important, which is when we get beyond this idea of entertainment being this focus of why you need a headset in the first place or why you need VR, I think a lot more people are going to begin to understand the value of this particular thing. But until then, it is still this thing of, why do I don't need to watch a movie in a headset. I don't need to play a game in a headset. That's not a valid excuse. It's not enough of a reason to give the mainstream public a reason to necessarily get into this tech. But, Bercy, what are your thoughts on cultural or technological shift that needs to happen?
Cool. So I'm going to start by refuting 2 points. Disagree with your thing about the controllers. Just learning from the console market, we can fit at least 3 controllers in without killing off the ecosystem. Any more than 3 and we're all doomed.
We're doomed.
And then the point about Hollywood as well. So what I've heard from people in LA specifically is that a lot of these Hollywood deals that we're seeing, they're like, oh, someone's bought a VR IP for loads of money, or someone's developing VR, or a certain studio is putting loads of money into VR.
Yeah.
A lot of that is just vapor because they're actually developing the IPs to create TV series with.
Exactly.
Or they're purchasing an IP that might have been made in VR because they think it's got legs and they're going to turn it into a TV show.
Yeah.
Or a movie because that's where the money is.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of the things that are going on in VR in Hollywood, it's literally they're just doing the cash grab, kind of land grab. They're seeing
putting a
talent.
flag in the sand, but they don't really understand.
It's more of a marketing to boost their existing series and show. Yeah. It's
exactly.
Not. It's never at the moment going to be a pure VR series. And if it is, it will be one, and that's it.
Yeah.
In this day and age, in the 2018.
Or it's even
it's a marketing add-on.
Yeah, or it's not even some points it's an add-on. Some places there's a really talented VR director here or creative, just in terms of like what needs to change to like culturally or industry wide. I think that the industry needs to become a more welcoming place again. Like,
yes,
I'm sure you've all seen it probably over the last year, specifically the last 6 months. Certain things got very cliquey.
Oh yes.
Certain like organisations or councils have been created that have upset a lot of people, or for certain reasons have.
We're not going to name any names, Bercy.
No, I'm not. They've pushed out certain people.
Oh yes.
To the point where there's a lot of like negative sentiment going on behind the scenes. And no one wants to call it out because no one wants to be shunned. But the fact that there is negative sentiment here, and it just shows that it was bound to happen because the industry is starting to actually monetize.
Yeah.
But there's not really that much money still. We're not in a case.
There's a perception of money without the reality of the money, if no pun intended.
It's the worst possible case.
Exactly. It's like there's not as much as there was, but there's still a lot of money pouring in through investment. But that's a lot of that is just investment. It's just money to build products which then get acquired by Intel later.
Yeah.
It's money for the sake of money to create more. It's just wealth generation. It doesn't actually add anything, and it's not really building our industry or our community. And because people see this money or they smell money, they're acting in ways that they wouldn't do otherwise.
Yeah.
And I think that kind of needs to be reverted a little bit if we're going to continue to succeed, at least at the pace that we have.
Yeah.
Like, even if things become cliquey, we'll still advance, we'll still develop, but I think the pace is going to be rapidly slowed, or things are just going to be a lot more sour. And then finally, just in terms of like industrial wise and commercial wise, I think we're going to have to see a lot more business to business and enterprise applications before we see real mainstream adoption.
Oh yeah.
Especially in terms of the way that I've explained this to people in the past, and they've kind of gone, oh yeah, is when you say to someone, computers didn't go into your home until they were in workplaces being used as word pressers. There's a reason they're called personal computers as opposed to computers.
Yeah.
And until we're seeing VR and AR and all immersive technologies become part of your usual day-to-day business operations, then it's not going to become weird. Like, until then, it's going to be a bit odd seeing someone on the bus using it. But when someone's got like a smart glasses on or an Oculus Go and they're on the bus, you'd be like, oh, they're probably doing their emails the same way you would with a laptop.
Yeah.
But until we reach that kind of that level of adoption in the workplace, I don't think we're going to see that seep into the general public.
Yeah, I fully agree with that point. But as always, we like to give our listeners a way to find out a little bit more about you. We ask you to do that by sharing with us your social media handle of choice. What would that be, Jeremy?
I'm going to go for Twitter today. And my Twitter handle is @JeremyC.Dalton.
Wonderful, thank you. Betty?
I'm going to go with Twitter as well. My Twitter is @Bertaroo or @VirtualUmbrella.
Wonderful, thank you. Q, are you going to cave to the social pressure?
Yep, I will follow suit, peer pressure, and go Twitter as well. So this is going to be interesting. Conan M. QAUNAINM.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for joining us and thank you for listening. If you enjoy this content, don't forget to subscribe and review, and follow us on Twitter @DigitalJamLTD. Thinking of starting your own podcast? Why not speak to the GL Pro UK team? They handle all of our podcasting service needs. Tell them that Digital Jam Session sent you and you'll get 10% off your first order. Find out more at www.glpro.co.uk. DigitalJamSessions.com